All right, so first question. If re-elected, how would you specifically help the following groups? A, children under 18, young families, and seniors.
Right. Well, in terms of children under 18, we've made very significant investments into the education system. In fact, we've doubled the amount of funding for education for the Department of Education. We've quadrupled the amount of funding for education infrastructure, which means schools, capital upgrades, those sorts of measures. Just today we announced a very significant new program for autism. That would provide individualized funding for those with families with an autistic child, $4,000 immediately, moving up to $8,000 over the next number of years, which is something we've been hearing about from those that are representatives of those groups. So, which received a very positive response today as well. I think it was called a landmark day in terms of funding for autism. So we've made those significant investments in terms of young families. We've cut taxes very, very significantly over the course of the last number of years, which is obviously important not just for young families but for everybody in the province. We've raised the basic personal exemption to the highest level it's ever been by far in the history of this province. Actually, it's taken 100,000 people off of the tax rolls in Saskatchewan. Which is a major investment, not to mention reductions in other areas of taxation. In terms of seniors, we've made significant investments into a number of areas that are directly beneficial to seniors, 13 new long-term care facilities which have been announced, very significant investments into other areas as well. So I think that we've made those investments which are going to benefit those under the age of 18, are going to benefit young families, are going to benefit everybody here in the province.
Awesome. So now, while Meadow Lake doesn't have a overly high crime rate, there is still a crime rate. What can be done to, bring that crime rate down?
Right. Well, we actually have been working very closely with the city and as the province, and also in terms of expanding the hub and core model that PA I think very successfully pioneered, has been moved to this community as well. And what that means is trying to break down the silos between the agencies, whether that be social services, whether that be health, whether that be the RCMP, municipal entities, stakeholder groups in the community. We've really worked hard on that, and I think we've seen results on that as well. And on top of that, I would add that as a province, we've made a huge investment into policing here in this community. That's been yearly renewed to the tune of I think about $600,000 or $700,000 per year is being provided by the province directly to the city for RCMP policing costs. So we've worked very closely. I think that the city would say that they're happy with the collaboration and relationship between the province and the city. We've worked with the RM as well. So I think that we've made strides. We know there are challenges, though. That being said, I think everybody in Meadow knows that there are challenges, but I think that we're doing a pretty good job, and I think that the fact that we're really working to break down these barriers and these silos is going to pay dividends in the long term.
Nice. What's your opinion on public-private partnerships such as the Regina Bypass, Saskatchewan Hospital, and Battleford's?
Right. Well, what we've seen over and over again, whether it be here in Saskatchewan or other jurisdictions which are utilizing P3s, is that you end up saving money and you end up with a project that's going to be done on time and on budget. And we've seen that over and over again in other jurisdictions. Not just us saying that. Other NDP governments have used P3s in other provinces as well, very successfully, I might add. So we are very much supportive of the model. We know it works. And it saves taxpayers money. It's allowed us to build 18 new schools right now that are under construction. The Regina Bypass project, which is I think the largest single capital infrastructure project in the history of the province. I know the other guys want to shut that project down, but that would delay the bypass by 2 years, add over $1 billion of cost to the project. And obviously not bring the project in on time. So, we think that that's a misguided approach. I know they've been talking about elements of that, but we're going to go forward with it. Construction's underway on the Regina Bypass. And in terms of kind of P3s in a more general sense, we've seen some very good results.
Nice, awesome. So given the importance of the vast industry sectors in this area, what would you do to improve the conditions for the ranchers, the loggers, fisheries, all the industry in the area?
Right, well, we've worked very, very closely, and as enterprise minister at one juncture and trade minister for 4 or 5 years, as minister responsible for jobs, I've had a lot to do with a lot of these files over the last 7 years. And I think that we have made tremendous strides in working with industry who provide employment and provide economic opportunity for young people and others in the Northwest and right across the province. In terms of our agriculture sector, we have seen a massive increase in the volume of production, in the exports that have been sent around the world, feeding the world literally from this province and from Northwest Saskatchewan. We've made significant investments into innovation to improve crop varieties, hardiness, the growing season shorter, those sorts of things which have paid real dividends. We also, in terms of the forestry sector, worked really closely with the companies here, have provided a FMA to Tolko, to Meadow Lake OSB, which I think has secured the long-term viability of that particular operation, which was very, very shaky for prior to us forming government in terms of their long-term viability. We've worked very closely with mechanical pulp, with MLTC and Norsask by extension, in terms of cogeneration power projects, which are moving forward. I know both there's discussions that continue about how we can make that project the most viable it can be. So we've worked really closely with the forestry sector, with the agriculture sector, in terms of other areas of the economy as well. I mean, we know that ag production, natural resource extraction, these are very important parts of our economy. The energy sector as well, of course, which has been very hard hit. So we're continuing to work closely with those sectors, and we know that this is the way that you create economic activity, that you create jobs, that you create opportunity, and we've created thousands of 60,000 jobs since we formed government. And what that means is that our young people don't have to leave Saskatchewan to find opportunity. They can find opportunity here at home.
Awesome. Given the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's findings, does our education system adequately teach students about residential schools and First Nations issues in general? Well,
you know what? One of the first things we did when we formed government was to introduce treaty education into primary schools as a part of the curriculum, core curriculum. So that had never been the case before. I know when I went to school here in Meadow Lake, that wasn't the case. That was one of the first things that we did. And I think that's provided benefits for understanding in terms of treaty issues. With regard to the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I guess I would add that even by way of background, when I was an MP, I actually did a lot of work on this. I was the vice chair of the Aboriginal Affairs Committee in Ottawa. Jim Prentice at that time and I were the two conservatives that were the leads on this file. And I would say that the report that we actually put together in the lead up to the 2004 election was to many degrees, in large measure, the basis on which the Conservative government afterwards proceeded with regard to putting forward the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, putting forward the payments for residential school survivors. So we've done a lot of work, and I've done a lot of work on this myself over the years. So, I think that there's work to be done. There, without question, there is. And to be fair, a lot of these issues are in federal areas of purely federal jurisdiction. A lot of them are. But in terms of my commitment as jobs minister, we actually have provided very significant funding on reserve for training, adult basic education particularly, which had never been the case before. And we're the only province in Canada that actually does this, where provincial funding is used on reserve for job training and adult basic education. So that was an initiative that I undertook and that our government have undertook. So I think we're making progress, and I want to see greater First Nations engagement in the economy. We still honestly have areas of the economy where we have labor shortages, where we have challenges. So that means an all of the above approach, and a big part of that is training and making ready to for the workforce Aboriginals here in the province in Northwest Saskatchewan.
So what more can be done to educate people on, the residential schools and all of that happened?
Well, I think that there are measures, and again, a lot of this falls in the area of federal jurisdiction in terms of how they're going to proceed on that. I think the fact that there was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission brought a lot of attention to an issue that perhaps a lot of people weren't aware of. I think there was a higher awareness of that in northern Saskatchewan, in that it was a very real issue for a lot of people who personally experienced residential schools, and those that have kind of experienced some of the fallout from that. So I think that there's probably less need for that here in the north, but the fact that we appointed, that the commission had been appointed and had done their work has served to raise awareness to a large degree.
All right. Where do you stand on how we provide temporary shelter for the homeless, such as the Lighthouse Women's Shelter?
Right. Well, we provide significant funding for shelters. I know this is a kind of more hot button issue perhaps in some of the larger centers who have needs that are perhaps larger than we would find. That's not to minimize the fact that we have challenges here in Meadow Lake as well, and some other communities also. But there are groups that do a very good job of that. The Door of Hope does some wonderful work, and we work very closely with the Door of Hope, and Elaine and I volunteer on occasion over at the Door of Hope. So there are groups and organizations that do, and individuals frankly, that do some very, very good work, are very committed to addressing some of the challenges that are had in the short term and in the longer term with people who are struggling. And we've as a government supported organizations largely through third parties, and that's the way that I think we've seen best results rather than just kind of government agencies doing it. We've partnered with CBOs and other groups to deliver some of these services, and I think there's more work to be done. There always is, and there always will be, frankly, more work to be done. But I think we are committed to addressing it and doing what we can to alleviate some of the issues that those are struggling have.
Awesome. So what are some of the pros and cons of privatizing liquor sales?
Right, what I think you're going to see, and even here in Meadow Lake, people are very aware of what you would see in, whether it be a private store, or frankly what you would see outside of Saskatchewan, or whether that be in Alberta or outside of Canada. I think the public are far ahead of where politicians are on liquor privatization. I think that I've heard positive things. The kind of biggest calls we got when we announced this initiative was how can I open up a franchise, or how can I become a vendor? And another important thing to remember is the majority right now of liquor distribution in Saskatchewan is privately done. Right now, the majority is privately done through vendors. Sickup as an example, or Milltown here in Meadow Lake. These are all already kind of private entities that are responsible for that. So, the Meadow Lake store is going to be remain in SLGA hands. But we're going to be moving forward with more opportunities for individuals to open stores. We're changing how the licensing requirements work, so it's going to kind of eliminate some of the weird differentiation between different licenses. Folks are going to be able to have I think what it'll ultimately result in is more choice, lower price, and more convenience.
So what's your stance? You agree with opening up more liquor stores? I know there's a town about half an hour towards Battleford that just recently opened up one, and there was a bit of public outcry about that. You agree with opening up more?
Yeah, we're expanding the number of vendor opportunities, the number of licenses, and there are people that are going to perhaps not be supportive of that, but I think the majority of people are, and there are going to be those who are vocal about opposition to that, but ultimately I think that the public are supportive of having that more choice, better service, more opportunity, lower price. That's what's going to come from having the changes that we're proposing made.
Nice. So is enough being done surrounding the issues of mental health, and if not, what more can be done?
Well, you know what, that's a challenging series of issues, and I think that there has been a real commitment there, and I think there's been an increasing level of public awareness of mental health challenges, and I think an increasing public acceptance, and that's going to be a big part of how we're going to be, I think, successfully addressing some of these issues going forward is that degree of public awareness, that degree of public acceptance that mental health issues are just as real as having a broken leg or a physical disability of some sort that can be managed and addressed. So I think that's a big part of it. So education is going to be a component of that. Also kind of, having people willing to kind of confront those issues. And I think that, again, kind of having the stigma associated with mental health lessened is going to be an important part of that.
All right, so incumbent Premier Brad Wall, he is against a federal tax on carbon emissions, saying it is far too costly to the Saskatchewan economy. If not a carbon tax, what can the province do to combat emissions, especially from Sask Power and Sask Energy?
Right, well, I mean, we're taking real concrete steps. I think you look at carbon taxes that have been introduced in other jurisdictions have nothing to do with reducing the amount of carbon going into the atmosphere. Nothing. They're taxes. They're revenue measures. They're not actually having any impact on behavior with respect to reduction of carbon. So we're doing something real. I mean, the carbon capture and storage facility at Boundary Dam and project has actually made a real difference in terms of reducing the amount of carbon going into the atmosphere by a very large and quantifiable amount. I mean, it's taken, I think, about the equivalent of 150,000 vehicles off the road. This is real. And when you look at the number of coal-producing facilities that are going to be built around the world in the foreseeable future, frankly, not just in the next little while, in the foreseeable future, this is a sort of project that reduces carbon emissions by 98%. That could have a very real impact, not just here in this province, but around the world, by selling this technology to other jurisdictions who are going to be able to utilize that technology to reduce those emissions and also reduce all of the other pollutants that come out of burning coal. So, our view is that there's a real future for coal. We're going to continue with the use of coal as a part of our power generation mix in the province. Other jurisdictions have taken a different view, which is going to result in very, very large increases in their utility rates. So we are committed to continuing with that, cleaning coal up, and exporting that technology around the world that's going to have a very real impact on reducing emissions. There's others who have taken the carbon tax approach. We have been very clear in saying that that's not something that we're interested in.
So you have these emissions going into essentially storage facilities?
Well, the way it works is the carbon's basically pumped into aquifers underground and stored indefinitely in that way.
So what happens in like 50, 60 years when you can't put any more in there?
Well, you know what, the geography, I could get some more information from beyond this, Colton, because I'm not an expert in kind of how the actual storage facilities are set up and how long a life frame they have. My understanding is that there's a very long time frame, though, that we're going to be able to do this for, basically unlimited. But we can follow up on that. Richard, you can follow up on that. Okay.
Fair enough. Awesome. Yeah. Last question here. At what point would a disagreement with your party lead to either resignation or floor crossing?
Well, I can assure you I will never be a New Democrat. No, we've been, I'm very committed to my party. I'm very committed to working with the Premier, who I've had the great pleasure of working with and knowing for nearly 20 years now, since I've been a teenager. I've had a wonderful opportunity to get to work with him. Before that, I had a great opportunity to get to work with the former Prime Minister as well. And, I just couldn't foresee a circumstance where something like that would even be a consideration. It's been a great honor serving as the MLA for Meadow Lake. It's been a great honor serving in the cabinet of the province of Saskatchewan for many years. a great honor holding the a number of portfolios and having that opportunity to serve in that way. You being able to deliver results because of that. I think we've delivered some very significant results, nearly $190 million over the last 8 years, just in capital and other expenditures here in this constituency, highways, upgrades,